All right, the audio is now live.
Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome, everybody. This is a city council workshop. Today is Monday, September 8th, 2025, and it's 6-ish p.m. Tonight on the agenda, we have a paramedicine presentation. And I assume we're inviting Fire Chief Lowe up. As we do around the table, we have Councillor Fish, Councillor Maller, Councillor Hawes, Councillor Dean, Councillor Trumbull, Councillor Fournier, Councillor Beck, Councillor Leonard, myself, Council Chair Pelletier. And it looks like we have a few people joining. Make things.
I'll land over here. How's that?
Come on in. So it looks like we are joined by Bangor Fire Chief Lowe and also Public Health Director Dunn. All right, who's kicking us off?
I think that'll be me.
All right,
Sure, yeah.
we're ready.
So presentation, do you have that?
You have that.
I just want to make sure it's.
It is on your iPads, I guess.
No, you can see it in the back.
Well, no, I can do it from my phone.
You want me to wait a minute or do you want me to just?
You can get started.
Yeah, it's
Open it up.
So we're looking at bringing a community paramedic into the city of Bangor. We're looking at doing this collectively. The reason Jen is here tonight, I'm Jeff Lowe, the fire chief, by the way. The reason Jen is here tonight is because this needs to be a collaborative between public health and the fire department. I don't have the capacity to staff a community paramedicine or community paramedic rather out of the fire department. Not only that, but the mission and the goal of that role, that position doesn't necessarily fall in line with where we are right now. We're certainly 911 emergent response based. When we talk about community paramedics, we're talking about putting a lower level practitioner in the field that can follow up other treatments from what we might normally provide. So in your second slide there, we talk a little bit about what is community paramedicine. Community paramedicine really got its start. It really became big in the Atlantic Canada provinces, where healthcare was a challenge. It was difficult to get people out to the islands. There wasn't necessarily a flood of physicians or primary care physicians that were able to be out there. So what they did is they took community paramedics or paramedics, which are probably more plentiful than doctors are, and put them in those locations. And they were able to provide a certain level of primary care that would otherwise be provided in a doctor's office. And what some of those things amounted to were things like wound care, follow-up for people that have respiratory illnesses such as emphysema or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, those types of things. People that need some assistance regulating their meds, people who recently had a heart attack and needed some type of follow-up instead of going back to the mainland or whatever, they were able to go out and use community paramedics. And as time evolved and things went on, they were able to leverage technology through video medicine and those types of things. That's really what community paramedicine was originally focused on in the outlying, more rural areas. It's still very important to have in those areas. It's still very prevalent in those areas, not only in the maritime provinces, but also in the United States. When we look at places like the Dakotas and other places where there isn't a lot of healthcare opportunities, especially in the more rural or remote areas. Now, when we think about Bangor, we don't really think about Bangor as being rural or remote. But if you look at us in comparison to other metropolitan areas around the country, we're considered a rural city, if you will. In a lot of areas, our population equates to what would be a big town. Now, while we're big for Maine, we aren't as big and we don't have as many resources as some of those larger metropolitan areas would have. Now, I will say that we have a considerable amount of resources compared to the smaller communities surrounding us. But I feel like, based on what I've seen so far in the community and the call volume that we have, that there's an unmet need within the community for follow-up care, especially when we look at some of the things that are occurring within our own health system with some of the medical providers that service this community. I fear that as things change in that realm, there will be more people that slip through the gaps with the need for follow-up and the need for monitoring and assistance and that sort of thing. And that's really what we're looking at. And community paramedicine is defined by the Rural Health Information Hub. It's just a healthcare model that puts paramedics into a different role. Instead of that 911 role, they're in that follow-up role, if you will. What it isn't, it's not meant to replace hospice. It's not meant to replace home health or any of those other programs. It's meant to fill the gaps that those programs don't necessarily fill. When we talk about hospice, we talk about people that are getting ready to transition in their lives and in pre-death care in those types of scenarios. When we talk about home health, we're very often talking about people who are more often shut in or not able to get around or those types of things. There are a fair amount of people that are in the primary care and home health care in that kind of void, if you will, that need some additional supports. And like I said, that's kind of what we're angling for here is to help them. So that's really what we're doing or looking to do. Paramedicine is like I said, providing care. It's doing risk assessments. It's doing some psychological work. It's making connections with additional care providers, all those types of things. So that's really what community paramedicine is all about. So if we go on, there are some shared goals between public health and EMS in general, especially when I look at EMS in terms of risk reduction and prevention within the community. And both within the fire service and within the EMS side or the ambulance side of the fire service, there is a risk reduction effort that should be taking place. We're pretty limited right now with what we have capacity for and what we have in place. So part of when we talk about sharing with public health, one, we're talking about sharing that capacity to be able to manage the program and to provide administrative and scheduling support, those types of things for that program. The other thing is the community paramedic falls more in line with that community health or public health mission, with providing for people who don't necessarily have those supports, with providing that ongoing medical care, if you will, as opposed to the 911 response care that we would normally be looking at. But some of the risk reduction goals and shared public health goals with us is to prevent injury and disability, prevent illness and death, promote prenatal care and healthy births, promote a healthy lifestyle, seek to reduce healthcare inequities when possible, and work to assure health services where otherwise not provided. So again, that's just reinforcing that in the fire department, our focus is 911 response. And all of this stuff is more public health focused, if you will. So we have that opportunity where community paramedicine has to be run through an EMS system. We have an opportunity to collaborate with another stakeholder in the city who can support that program, which we feel, and I don't want to speak out of turn for Jen here, but we feel that although we can't validate it yet, there's certainly a need in the community. And I think enabling us to go through the program to take on, we're going to be looking for approval to get a grant to be able to fund this for at least a year. We think that year will help validate the need because the problems that we think are there but are yet to be fully recognized, we think they're going to actually come to light, and we'll have a better understanding of what we're looking at. We talk about some healthcare barriers. I already talked about one of those, which is a decreased access to primary care. Excuse me. There is still a fair number of people that are either underinsured or uninsured completely that would be able to benefit from this program. Increased emergency room visits because of the decrease in primary care physicians, the dependence on walk-in care, and also the dependence on emergency room care. It's really gumming up the entire system. So there are ambulance patients that will show up at the emergency room and actually receive treatment in the emergency room instead of being able to go back to a bed right away. And it's not uncommon for you to find somebody in the emergency room who's receiving medication for a heart-related event or a lung-related event, something that would otherwise be highly critical that they're just not able to move back. So if we're able to focus on the prevention side and the continuum of care side, where we're helping people before they get to that level where they need some type of emergency room intervention, it helps take a load off that the system. Ideally, community paramedicine helps reduce readmission rates, especially 30-day readmission rates, which is where things become questionable as to whether or not insurance will pay for it, and does that fee fall back on the person who's readmitted, those types of things. Limited home health, access to home health, and then just, like I said, that continuum of care, that coordinated care. So that community paramedic almost becomes a liaison in the absence of home health to work with that person's primary care provider or what have you, to make sure that that person's getting what they need. A little discussion in there about readmission, and the cost expended with that. And then the last two slides are basically just a synopsis of kind of what we've already covered about how community paramedics can help when we talked about telemedicine. So if a community paramedic goes out to a resident who has some wound care issues and it doesn't necessarily look right to the community paramedic, there's an opportunity for that person to use a tablet or a cell phone or whatever and be able to stream that back to a physician or a mid-level provider like a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant to be able to either give some guidance or recommend admission or so. A lot of really good opportunity here to provide care to, I think, as of yet unrecognized groups in the city that need that continuum if it's available to them. And I'll let Jen be more specific about the proposal and what that consists of and kind of what we're asking for as we dig into this one.
Thank you. First, I just want to say, I think you just earned an honorary master's in public health degree with that explanation.
I appreciate that.
Thank you for advocating for public health. So, Chief Lowe was approached by Dr. Jonathan Busco, who worked at St. Joseph's Hospital. Dr. Busco has been a true champion of community paramedicine for probably over a decade at this point. And so it's been fun to see it actually kind of come to some fruition. So he approached us with the proposal that the Cole Foundation is providing some funding to actually implement the community paramedicine program in, I believe, about 5 pilot locations. The pilot will run about 18 months. Dr. Busco approached Bangor thinking this would be a great location, particularly with some good relationships with St. Joe's, PHC, Northern Light. And this is under the umbrella of the CCP and the community entities. And so the proposal or the funding that we'd be able to access would pay for a vehicle, so an SUV-like vehicle, the equipment and materials to stock it for at least that first 18 months. It would include some funds for a staff person. And what they sort of originally approached us with is that we would be paid by sort of call out of a pot of money from the foundation. What we sort of talked with them about is that's a little bit too risky, that if we didn't have the call volume, it would be left on the city to kind of fill in those holes. So they were able to talk with the foundation, say we could actually upfront you the money that was put aside that you would have gotten by call to actually pay for an F1 FTE. So some pilot locations are looking to train up about 3 paramedics. What we're looking at is having 1 FTE paramedic with those funds just to pilot it. And then the money would also be provided for that paramedic to go through the additional training that's needed to be a community paramedicine. And there's different levels of training. What we're looking at, the most advanced level is actually equivalent to associate's degree. We'd be looking at before that because that's just a lot of training for sort of really piloting the program. That position would be out of the Department of Public Health and Community Services with strong connections to the fire department. There needs to be sort of dual oversight from someone who has the emergency medicine background and someone who's in family medicine primary care. That could actually be the same person, but there are some funds to be able to support that. There's also funds to support a part-time coordinator. So someone who's looking at the schedule, someone who's building a relationship with the partners, and someone to really help be the logistics person in the back end. The other thing that's kind of exciting about this proposal is that part of the funding that sort of CCPM, the larger entity, had is to pay for a financial person who is going to put together the sort of financially sustainable packets for each one of the pilot sites to say, okay, by the time that this 18 months is over, this is how you bill main care. This is how you bill all the other insurances so that we could just be off and going. So it gives us that time to pilot it, really promote it, to bring up those visits, to make sure that it's financially sustainable after those 18 months. And so what would be coming to you next week is a council order to approve sort of the application to those funds. And I believe the start date was January.
We had talked about January. We had looked at, we had originally looked at the multi person approach. And, you know, like Jen was talking about the funding and the importance of consistency with this program, especially having one person going out and seeing people instead of trying to share notes made the most sense to us. If this becomes bigger than we expected it to be, then I think there's an opportunity to talk about something different. But we're pretty confident that's the model we should be following right now.
Questions, Councilor House?
Will there be age groups that they'll start seeing, or they're just gonna see people right away? Because you've got walk-in cares are closing. The OB practices are kind of going by the wayside, and they're not doing what they were doing with people. So you're gonna have all of those new moms that will potentially need help still, that are being discharged. So is it broken down into what they are allowed to see? Are they?
So it's based upon their training, and what we were informed is because it's sort of a CCPM sort of model, the first priority is going to be home visits out of patients from St. Joe's. So those that may have had inpatient, emergency department, primary care, that's going to be the first focus, are people who need that home visit. And then it's really going to be up to us to say who are our priority populations right now. You know, we have seen, you know, an aging population that just needs somebody to come in and make sure their medications are, you know, their pill boxes are correct and their blood pressure, you know, provide that support. And we've seen the postnatal care that needs to happen. So I think it's a real opportunity for us to take a look at what are the needs out there and really settle in on what the priorities are going to be, knowing there's some flexibility to that because it is.
I think the only thing that would prevent us from taking on people would be the capacity of the provider. As the program develops, referrals, so the initial referrals will be like Jen talked about from St. Joe's because we're aligned with St. Joe's. But as the program becomes better known, then referrals can come from EMS. I would imagine that referrals could potentially come from BCAT, Northern Light, or other organizations. So so I think that's really the only limiting factor. And legally, I'm not sure that we could refuse anybody to set up an age bracket like that. I think, like I say, it's going to depend on the capacity of the provider.
Just a question about 18 months from now, what metrics are we looking at to say, hey, this was successful, we need to keep this going?
So I think the initial metric is there a need for it in the community? And we can't really evaluate that yet. I think the secondary metrics will be discussed with St. Joe's again, because they're kind of intertwined with us. And we haven't got that far yet, but if I had to guess, I would guess that they would be looking at readmission rates. They would be looking at satisfaction rates that will come through their processes there. I think part of the metrics that we'll look at will be generated out of public health, and where we're so new in this yet, I don't know that Jen has even had an opportunity to really look at what we would measure specifically. But I'm sure that's something we could come back to. I think that there is almost too much data that we could try to pull out of this, at least initially. So it's going to take a little work to refine what we're looking to glean to validate the program. I think if the council had something in particular that they were interested in, I think that could be certainly funneled through the city manager, and that's something that we could try to capture.
And just to build on that, I think what's really interesting is because this is part of a larger pilot program, they've built in, they've already talked with academic researchers who are very interested in doing evaluation. And because it's linked with CCPM, I'm going to geek out for a minute here, but we've got like access to a ton of claims data that would be able to measure and evaluate.
So we're the only public health fire department collaboration right now, and that was of interest to the folks down in Massachusetts that are writing research papers on this. So,
Councilor Leonard?
I had a question regarding the two options regarding having one primary person and having multiple individuals. I mean, it just a professional orientation of mine. I just have a hunch that we will probably need more individuals to do this type of work, just knowing the mitigating circumstances of healthcare that are going to be imposed upon this area of the state. And so does that, like, a guesstimation kind of make it seem like it might be a worthy endeavor to further see if multiple individuals for this pilot program would be a better use as opposed to a single individual? Because I know data is sort of the idea of how to gather information from this regarding if it's going to be successful or not. For me, I sort of look at it from the perspective of these are people who are helping individuals. The data is great, but I rather just have boots on the ground helping people out in general. Do you think that would? Well, I guess I would just want to see more information regarding the two approaches in general. I mean, I'd be supportive of either one, but I do tend to favor the idea of more having more boots on the ground.
So I agree with you. I think part of the challenge with this is if we don't make it enticing, not that it's not enticing, but if we don't make it enticing in terms of some type of commitment or full-time commitment, if you will, it will be hard to get somebody. It'll be hard to get consistency within the program, which is really what we need to begin with. I would agree with you that it's gonna require more resources. I think what I would like to do, and we can give you, whatever it is you're looking for. I think that conversation would be better had at probably the 8 or 12 month mark, when we have a better understanding of where we are with the program, where we think it's going, and what the needs are. Because it may be that we can bring a community paramedic provider in that's at a lower level and accomplish even more than what we're accomplishing now, if that makes sense to you. When we talk about the tiers, we're looking at a tier right now that can accomplish a lot, but there's also a lot at the lower level that can be done as well. So I think we can provide what you want now, but I think it would be more informative at that outer mark, if that makes sense to you.
That's fair enough. I do like the idea of doubling back on this and like halfway mark, something like that. I think we are going to learn though that more is better, but I do concede the point that you do want accurate data with a consistent employee It just pains me to start so slow with something like.
And just quickly also add to that, with the soft launch, it kind of takes the pressure off that we have to have X amount of encounters so that we can bill for it. So that's what sort of was the deciding factor for me, that if we took the many people approach, we wouldn't have gotten that one lump sum up front to pay for one FTE. And so what would have happened is the day that we said, go with this program, we would have had to have exactly amount of encounters to bill for to be able to get sort of paid for that time. If that makes, so over the
Okay.
18 months, we're allocated X amount of dollars. They're saying is we're gonna give you all the dollars up front so you can hire the FTE rather than billing for that
Okay,
group.
I'm picking up what you're putting down, okay.
Counselor Fish and then Counselor Dean.
So Cole Foundation and St. Joe's would coordinate with the Community Health and Services to implement the program. And is that one of their?
Not Community Health and Counseling Services,
Just
so
St. Joe's, how would it be coordinated and implemented? And how would you identify who the potential patients are of most need?
So the way it would be coordinated is Maine EMS is the Maine Emergency Medical Services is the regulatory authority for provision of all emergency medical services in the state of Maine. And they have said that to stand up this program, it has to be a licensed EMS service that does that. That's where the fire department comes in. So we would apply for the license. We would license the provider under our service license. We would ensure that they are meeting their continuing education and all the other requirements as far as that goes. The initial outlay of money and acquiring resources would be facilitated between Jen and I. The money would come in through the foundation that Dr. Busco is working with. That's where the grant money would come in. We would collaboratively, Jen and I would work on budgeting, invoicing, all those other things, however it is that we would do that, whether we keep track of the budget ourselves or we do check-ins with a provider through her organization. And then Jen, I'll let you talk about scheduling and all those pieces. How are you thinking about that up at your shop?
I do want to just say we are running short on time, so if we can just keep it very short, we'll get to your question and then you have more? Okay.
So we'll be receiving referrals from many different entities. We'll start off with St. Joseph's to focus on the home health piece and then build from that. So referrals will come in through the person who's that part-time person here to coordinate schedule. Then those referrals will be provided to community paramedicine. And then that's when sort of the systems kind of slowly starts to build.
Counselor Dean?
The process of hiring this healthcare professional, would they be from within the St. Joseph's healthcare system?
Not necessarily, if we would open up a position.
And at this point, the credentials could be different depending on what you find. And the job could be tailored more to the person that you find.
So if we're lucky, we would get a already trained community paramedic that would want to come in and do it. If not, we would need to hire a paramedic and then send them to the community paramedicine program. But again, that's all paid through the community paramedicine training is paid through the grant.
Including their time.
Including your time, yes.
One quick question, the timing perfect with the learning how to build. I'm thinking about the HIV folks, the caseworkers there. Well, what we learned about billing for this program, do you think they'll carry over to that?
We're thinking alike on. We've got a few other things up our sleeves about building that in public health department.
Thank you. I don't see any opposition around the table, so we'll look forward to seeing that order.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. All right, next up, we will be joined by City Assessor Phil Drew for an update on our 2026 reval.
Thank you very much. Bill Drew, City Assessor. Do you have my memo? So I would say that the revaluation is going pretty well. They've visited all the residential single family, 1 to 4 family, mobile homes, condos, and residential vacant land properties. And they've at least completed an exterior measurement of those structures. So most of the feedback that we get from the community members, if it's something of an issue, the one thing that KRT does every morning, whoever's directing the field work, will check in with my office and see if anybody needs to be attended to, specifically have a specific concern addressed, if any. There aren't that many, but they're very, very willing, and on a daily basis they ask and they respond when necessary, and I will respond and my staff will respond to emails that we receive. So we haven't actually received that many, but in each email, the one thing I do is encourage them to allow an inspection of the property on the inside of the property, and that gives them the data that they need to most accurately assess the property. And otherwise, they would just be estimating from some distance or the street. So it's all up to the property owner to decide. And so at this point, they've been to 8,800 residential properties, and there are still 5,300 that don't have interior data that they've collected themselves, or that they feel that they can rely upon when it's given to them by the property owner. So if they're on the porch and the property owner describes their home, they take down that data, and they would generally rely upon that. So there are about 5,300 of those residential properties, and to date, 1,000 of those 5,300 properties have received another letter that asks the property owner to call KRT, and with KRT's scheduling staff, they can pick their own date and time to do the interior inspection if they elect to have one completed. So it's actually pretty convenient to do. And we would always encourage individuals to take advantage of that. So then they'll pretty much in batches of 500 over the next few months, they will send out those letters requesting the interior inspection. And then beyond that, there's about 2,700 commercial, industrial, large apartment properties and commercial vacant land. So that class of properties, they will also begin in the month of September, updating all the measurements, collecting data where they can on the interior of the commercial properties, industrial properties, hotels. So they'll kind of keep that process going. So throughout the fall will be residential and commercial properties being inspected in the city. And so I gave you a table which just showed their progress over time. So I think they made pretty good progress in the summer. So I was pleased. I'm very pleased to see that. And if you have any questions or feedback, anything
Dr. Dean?
you want me to consider?
If access is not granted to the interior and the property owner has not spoken with anyone, will there be an eventual questionnaire for people to fill out what their home currently has, or are you relying solely on getting inside to say?
No, the questionnaire is really at the election of KRT, whether they, if the percentage is so low with the callback letters, if the their choice may next be to send out the questionnaires or data inquiry letters to allow the property owner to supply that same information.
Council Fournier?
It might be good to get, see what percentages historically KRT has done. Not too much at this point in time, but at the end, just to see if it's comparable before running out and grade one.
Yeah, I talked to the Lewiston assessor. They're having Tyler Technologies do their work. And I think they were reporting, he reported to me last week that they were about 25% success rate on do the interior inspections and about a 20 percentage point return rate on the data letters. So they were still under 50% from the public's participation. Yeah. The only other time where they can provide information is when in the spring, when the value estimates are sent out. Then they do have another opportunity to come in and talk to KRT staff about the value and about the data that's being used to value their property.
Other questions? Is this as far along as you hoped they'd be, or a little ahead, a little behind?
Well, I was hoping for more participation.
Mhm.
You know, I didn't think the participation rate would be this low.
Well, there's still hope because I haven't received my letter yet, so.
So anybody out there in public, take advantage if you so choose. Yeah. And so that's everything on the revaluation.
Excellent. What else?
Oh, my two new hires in February and March are now both certified Maine assessors, having passed their 8-hour exam to become assessors. So our staff now has 3 certified assessors.
Excellent.
Yes. But I must say, most of it was through their own self-study. We worked a little bit together, but yeah,
Excellent.
pretty top notch.
Any other questions for Phil? Anything else on your agenda?
No, that's it.
Very good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think that's it on the workshop agenda. Anything else for the good of the order? All right, we are adjourned. City Council's at 7.